There comes a period in life that many people rarely say out loud, yet deep inside, almost everyone feels the same thing. It's the moment when we realize we've done everything exactly the way the world told us to do it. We tried our best, worked hard, planned our lives logically, thought carefully before speaking, thought carefully before making decisions, tried to be a good person, a disciplined person. Someone who by every reasonable standard should already be happy by now. And yet, strangely enough, the older we become, the more responsibilities we carry, the heavier the heart seems to feel. Exhaustion comes more easily, the mind becomes restless more quickly, and sometimes it feels as if life is running endlessly on a treadmill with no finish line in sight. Even though everything on the outside may look perfectly fine, inside, something keeps quietly trembling all the time. We can manage our work, we can organize our schedules, we can control almost every external detail of life, yet somehow, we cannot control our own emotions, we cannot stop our thoughts. And the more we try to force the mind to be calm, the more it struggles and resists, until eventually many of us begin to wonder, what if the problem was never the world, never other people, but perhaps, all along, it has been the way we've been using our own mind to live our lives. Because all our lives, we have been taught how to survive in the world, yet almost never taught how to care for the most important instrument of all, our own mind. We learned how to compete, how to succeed, how to plan for the future, but no one ever told us that if the mind remains restless, then no matter how complete life may appear on the outside, happiness will always feel as if something is missing. Because the nature of the human mind was never designed to stay still, it keeps moving endlessly, drifting back toward a past that can never be changed, rushing forward into a future that has not yet arrived, flowing along with fear, hope, worry, and the constant flood of stimulation that never truly stops, like a machine running too many applications at once until it begins to slow down without us even realizing it. And when the mind is unsettled, we become like someone trying to look at their reflection in rippling water. No matter how hard we try to see clearly, we can never truly recognize ourselves. This is precisely why training the mind is not something distant, not something reserved for monks or temple goers, nor a mysterious practice meant only for advanced spiritual seekers. It is a fundamental life skill that every human being truly needs, because concentration does not arise simply because we wish to feel calm. It is something that must be cultivated, just like a muscle that grows only through proper and consistent use. And when many people first turn inward and try sitting quietly for the very first time, what they encounter is not peace at all, but a sudden amplification of inner chaos. Thoughts about work, money, relationships, the past, and the uncertain future begin rushing in without pause, until many quickly conclude that they lack concentration altogether, when in truth, this is not failure at all. It is the very first moment we begin to see the true nature of the mind as it really is, because until now, the mind has never been still long enough for us to truly notice it. And it is exactly at this point that the heart of mental training truly begins, through something so ordinary that we often overlook it completely, anapanasati, the simple awareness of breathing in and breathing out, not through forceful concentration, not through suppression, not by pushing thoughts away, but by allowing the mind to finally have a home, a place of rest, a point it can always return to. And in this way, the breath becomes something quietly extraordinary, because it has always been with us, needing no creation, no imagination, and no special moment to access it. When we begin to truly notice the breath, we discover something surprising, that we have never actually breathed with awareness before. We have been breathing our entire lives, yet rarely present with a single breath. And knowing the breath is not about making it better, calmer, or more refined. It is simply recognizing it exactly as it is in this moment. If the breath is long, we know it is long. If it is short, we know it is short, without adding thought or analysis. Because the very moment thinking begins, the mind has already drifted away from the present. Practice, then, is not about never losing awareness, but about recognizing the moment we have drifted away and gently returning again and again. And every time awareness awakens, that very moment is mindfulness quietly growing within us. Where once the mind would wander far before we even noticed, one day we begin to recognize it sooner, seeing thoughts before they carry us away, and gradually sensing a subtle space emerging between the thought itself and the one who knows the thought. As awareness becomes more continuous, perception naturally expands from the breath to the entire body. We begin to notice the movements of the body, the subtle refinement of each breath, the deep connection between body and mind, and what is known as the bodily formation slowly begins to soften and release on its own. The breath becomes more delicate, the mind settles with gentle stability, and when the mind truly begins to rest in steadiness, what unfolds next is not merely calmness, but the beginning of seeing our own reality in a way we have never seen before. We start to observe that thoughts arise on their own, emotions change on their own, feelings come and pass away, never truly under our control as we once believed, and our understanding of what we have always called ourselves begins to quietly tremble. And it is precisely here that the truth of constructed self and the belief in a permanent self gradually reveals itself through direct experience, showing that the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind are merely processes of perception arising and passing away, not a permanent self that must be defended at all times. As this is seen again and again, attachment naturally begins to loosen on its own, and the immense burden we have carried in order to preserve the image of who we believe ourselves to be grows remarkably lighter, almost without effort. And as the practice continues, a quiet yet life-changing understanding begins to emerge from deep within. That no matter how far we run in search of refuge outside ourselves, if the heart has not truly understood the Dhamma, suffering will continue to follow us wherever we go. But when mindfulness and concentration truly begin to become an inner refuge, the outer world gradually loses its power over the heart. Life no longer needs to be perfect for us to feel at peace. The Dhamma begins to reveal itself within the most ordinary moments, from something cherished breaking apart, to mistakes at work, or small disappointments that once shattered our spirit, because we begin to see that everything unfolds according to causes and conditions. And this understanding does not lead us to escape the world, but allows us to live within it with deeper stability than ever before. Eventually, we discover that training the mind does not immediately change the world, but slowly transforms the one who is looking at the world from within. And when the heart finally has a ground upon which it can stand, life does not become lighter because problems disappear, but because we no longer need to carry everything as mine anymore, and that is the quietest yet most powerful transformation a human being can encounter in this lifetime. And when we arrive at this point, many people begin to encounter another truth that is rarely spoken of at the beginning of the path of mental training. The restlessness we once found irritating, tried to push away, or believed to be an obstacle, is not a failure at all. In fact, it is a crucial doorway revealing the true power of the mind itself. Because the moment we sit still and discover that thoughts keep racing without pause, old memories suddenly surface, new concerns slip in, emotions rise and fall like waves that never seem to settle, it does not mean we are incapable of meditation. It means we are seeing for the very first time what has been happening inside our minds our entire lives. The human mind possesses immense power, traveling to the past and the future within a fraction of a second, creating stories, fears, or even happiness on its own, without anything actually happening in reality. The problem was never the wandering mind, but that we never learned how to live with this power and understanding. We allowed the mind to drift wherever stimulation pulled it, like a boat without a rudder, moving with whatever it sees, and changing instantly from just a single word we hear. But along the path of practice, the very same mind that becomes lost is also the mind capable of awakening to itself. And the most important turning point in training does not lie in how long we can remain still, but in that brief moment, so short it is almost unnoticed, when we suddenly realize that just a moment ago, the mind had wandered away. That instant is the awakening of mindfulness, like a small light switching on in a dark room. And every time we recognize this and gently guide the mind back to the breath, we are strengthening an inner muscle without force, without struggle, and without blaming ourselves. Because training the mind is not about defeating nature, but learning how to cooperate with it. It is like calling back a puppy that keeps running away, again and again, without anger, until one day it begins to remember the way home on its own. And change begins to unfold so gradually that we barely notice it happening. From once being lost for long stretches before becoming aware, we begin to notice more quickly. From emotions that once carried us far away, there appears a small pause before we follow them. The space between thought and the one who knows the thought becomes clearer. And within that very space, the heart begins to touch a new kind of freedom. A freedom not born from controlling every aspect of life, but from no longer being dragged along by life as before. Concentration, therefore, does not arise from forcing the mind into stillness, but gradually blossoms through repeated moments of awareness, like drops of water gathering until they become a flowing stream. One day, we begin to feel that the mind has a foundation, an inner ground to stand upon. Even while the outer world remains just as chaotic as before, work is still demanding, people still speak the same way, problems continue to arise as they always have, yet the heart no longer flows helplessly along with everything. The restlessness that once felt like an enemy slowly becomes a teacher. Because every time it appears, it offers another chance to awaken once again. And when mindfulness truly gains strength, the mind no longer needs to be pulled back with exhaustion. It begins to remain on its own, resting with the breath, resting in the present moment, resting with the reality unfolding right before us. And in that very moment, many come to understand deeply that training the mind is not about eliminating thought, but about transforming from someone lost within thoughts, into someone who clearly sees them. What once seemed like distraction reveals itself as the very power of awareness, the fuel that allows mindfulness to grow, until concentration is no longer something we must create, but becomes the mind's original nature quietly returning to its own stability, calm, unwavering, and profoundly deep. And as the practice continues to deepen, there comes a point where we begin to discover an essential truth that many have never noticed before, that the hardest part of meditation is not sitting for long periods, nor emptying the mind, but learning to place the heart correctly from the very beginning. Because the moment the mind quietly assumes that something must be achieved, effort, expectation, and the desire for calm subtly slip in unnoticed. What began as simple awareness of the breath slowly turns into unconscious concentration, into control, and eventually into a fatigue whose cause we cannot explain. The more we want the mind to be still, the more tension arises, the more we long for peace, the more thoughts multiply. Even though the heart of breathing awareness is extraordinarily simple, allowing the breath to be exactly as it is. If the in-breath is long, we simply know it is long. If the out-breath is long, We simply know it is long, like someone standing at the shore watching ocean waves without ever trying to command them to change their form. And when the rhythm of the breath becomes short, we simply know it is short, without questioning, because the very moment analysis begins, the mind immediately moves away from direct knowing and returns once again to the world of thought. The practice, therefore, is not about making the breath something special, but about stopping the mind's old habit of constantly interfering and fabricating meaning around everything. As awareness continues gently and steadily, the field of perception begins to expand on its own. From once knowing only the breath at the tip of the nose, we begin to feel the entire body, the movement of the chest, the rising and falling of the abdomen, and the tensions or relaxations that once occurred unnoticed now become clearly seen. And in that very moment, we start to understand that body and mind have never truly been separate, the breath itself serving as the bridge that connects them both. When mindfulness knows without interfering, physical formations gradually settle by themselves, the breath becoming finer, lighter, and softer in a completely natural way, not because we force it, but because the mind has stopped disturbing the living process. At this point, the heart begins to experience space. Calmness no longer feels rigid or confined, but open, light, and quietly awake, as if fully aware of the world just as before, yet no longer pulled or dragged along by it in the same way. And here lies the quiet beauty of breathing awareness, because it begins to teach us something without the need for words, that life does not need to be controlled at every moment. Many things naturally resolve themselves when we stop overshaping and interfering unnecessarily. Awareness of the breath is therefore not merely a meditation technique, but a training in how to live in alignment with the truth of life itself. When happiness arises, we know it. When suffering appears, we know it, without rushing to push anything away or urgently trying to fix it. And as this knowing becomes more stable, the mind begins to settle naturally, not through suppression, but through understanding, until gradually, the path toward truly understanding ourselves begins to open. And when practice matures to a certain point, peace is no longer something accidental, but becomes the natural result of seeing something more clearly from within. Life then starts leading us toward questions deeper than the pursuit of happiness or the escape from suffering, because a mind that has found stability will finally turn back to look at what it has never truly seen before. It is the simplest question, yet also the greatest one of all. What is it truly that we call ourselves? Here, the doorway to sense of self begins to open, not as an abstract idea found in scriptures, but as a truth that must be seen through direct experience. For throughout our entire lives, we have used the word I, without ever pausing to examine whether the self we refer to actually exists in the way we assume. As mindfulness grows more refined, a surprising truth slowly reveals itself. The mind has never been still even for a single moment. Thoughts arise and vanish. Feelings appear and fade. Emotions that felt deeply important only hours ago dissolve almost without a trace. Everything flows continuously like a river in which no single drop remains the same, yet we keep calling that flowing current me, and spend an entire lifetime trying to hold on to it. This is the misunderstanding that grasps the body, thoughts, and emotions as a permanent self. And because of this belief, we become endlessly exhausted trying to protect it. A few careless words can wound us. The lack of acceptance from someone can turn into profound suffering, even though all of it is nothing more than temporary experiences arising and passing within the mind. The training of the mind, therefore, is not about eliminating feelings, but about beginning to see that none of those feelings truly belong to us in the way we once believed. As mindfulness repeatedly observes that seeing is simply seeing, sound is merely sound, thoughts are only thoughts, and emotions are nothing more than phenomena arising and passing beyond our command, the tight grip of attachment gradually loosens on its own, without any effort to force letting go. It is like someone who has carried a heavy burden for years, only to suddenly realize that it never needed to be carried at all, and in that moment, the weight falls away without struggle. What changes is not the outer world, but our relationship with every experience in life. We begin to understand that not every thought needs a response, not every emotion deserves belief, and there is no longer a need to constantly defend the image of who we think we are. The lightness that emerges is not an excited or fleeting happiness, but a deep sense of relief, as if an immense inner space has quietly opened. A life once driven by the struggle to protect the self gradually transforms into a way of living grounded in understanding the natural nature of all things. And from the very moment we begin to see that the self is not something solid or fixed as we once believed, life slowly shifts from struggling to conquer the world, into learning how to live peacefully within it. And right there, the beginning of true freedom quietly emerges, not from gaining something more, but from gradually laying down what was never necessary to carry in the first place. Until one day, we discover that the lightness we have searched for all along was never far away, but has always existed within a mind that finally stops carrying a self that was never truly there. As this understanding begins to take root more deeply, the training of the mind no longer remains confined to the meditation cushion, but gently flows into everyday life. We begin to realize that the Dhamma does not exist only when our eyes are closed, but is present within every moment of living, from waking up, walking, working, speaking with others, even within the ordinary moments we once overlooked. Because in truth, suffering has never arisen from places, never from other people, and never from external events at all, but from the way the mind clings to the world itself. The more we try to control, the more we insist that life must follow our wishes, the more we struggle to hold on to what cannot remain unchanged, the heavier the heart becomes, again and again. But when the heart truly begins to take the Dhamma as its refuge, when mindfulness recognizes in time and wisdom clearly sees causes and conditions, the outer world gradually loses its power to shake the mind. Life may still present the same problems as before, yet the heart no longer needs to carry them in the same heavy way. We begin to see the Dhamma most clearly not in grand or dramatic moments, but within the smallest events of everyday life, such as the day something we love accidentally breaks. Where once irritation arose, where we blamed ourselves or someone else, the very same event now becomes a quiet lesson revealing that decline and loss are simply natural. We begin to see that everything unfolds according to causes and conditions, that nothing is being destroyed personally, and no part of the world is deliberately trying to harm us. Seeing in this way does not make us indifferent or cold, but instead allows us to care for life with greater mindfulness and responsibility, without adding unnecessary suffering into the heart. The Dhamma, therefore, is not an escape from the world, but the learning of how to live within it with true understanding. And when we begin to look more deeply, we slowly realize that all the teachings that once seemed complex, whether the path of living, the truth of suffering, or the intricate web of cause and effect, are all pointing toward the very same truth. They are guiding us to see the mechanism of suffering exactly as it is. When this understanding arises, life shifts from running away from problems to learning from every experience that unfolds. Suffering is no longer seen as an enemy, but becomes a teacher revealing the true nature of the mind. And the deeper this understanding grows, the less we struggle. We no longer need to wait for the world to become perfect before finding peace, because true stability begins to arise from within. The mind that once flowed helplessly along with the world gradually learns to stand on its own. And when the heart has found a rightful refuge, even if the world remains just as chaotic as before, life can still move forward with steadiness, gentleness, and a quiet inner strength, like someone who finally discovers that the safety they have searched for their entire life was never far away at all, but has always existed within a mind that knows, understands, and can live with reality without needing to escape anymore. This is what it truly means to bring the Dhamma into real life, not to withdraw from the world, but to live within it with genuine freedom. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If you enjoyed this kind of content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and join us as we continue the journey through many more stories together in the next episode.